privilege to welcome Catherine McCall to Dublin to be our keynote speaker for our April Child Abuse Awareness Program. Her reputation as an inspiring leader in the field of child advocacy is an understatement. She is a champion for children. In 2009, she published her story, When the Piano Stops, a memoir of healing from sexual abuse. Reviews of this book all begin with words such as courageous, compelling, inspiring, life-changing, and phenomenal. The book chronicles her journey of recovery, of remembering things that had been forgotten, of discovering insights into things that had previously had not made sense, of the struggle of moving from victim to survivor. I will add that it is not just a story of her journey, but of the support from her immediate family members that walked it with her. As Catherine is a therapist and a survivor, she is able to tell her story in a way that few other memoirs of the experienced sexual abuse allow, giving readers unique insight into the experience. Her book is a testament to the power of familial support, to resilience, and to the strength that can be drawn from faith. When her book was released in the United Kingdom under a different title, Never Tell the True Story of Overcoming a Terrifying Childhood, her work spent 4 weeks on the London Sunday Times bestseller list. Catherine has been a marriage and family therapist for almost 30 years. She is a regular blogger for Psychology Today, covering the subject of overcoming child abuse. She is a clinical fellow in the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapy and has served several terms of office on the board of directors of the Georgia Association for Marriage and Family Therapy, including a term as vice president. She also serves on the Speakers Bureau of the Rape and Incest National Network. Catherine lives and works in Roswell, Georgia. She and her husband, Peter, who's the executive director of Care for the Troops, have reared 4 daughters and enjoy 8 grandchildren. You can learn more about her and her book by visiting her website, catherinemccall.net. Please welcome Catherine McCall.
Kelly, thank you for that introduction. I hardly recognized the person. It sounded like a lot was going on in her life. It's really a privilege to be here today. I knew that before I came, but I'm going to tear up a bit. The energy here and the obvious commitment of community is very touching to me. And starting off with the children singing was truly beautiful. So I want to thank you in advance. I'm going to share some of my thoughts about the topic of child abuse prevention, particularly in how it relates to our current culture, followed by some of my own experiences of having been abused as a child. Peter, would you raise your hand if this gets where you can't hear right? Okay. I'll read 2 short excerpts from my memoir and discuss a little bit about the publishing process and some of the reactions that I've received from readers. And then I'll close with a personal story about one of my grandchildren and leave you with a few thoughts to take home with you. When I was a child and adolescent, I had no idea that there was anything like the organizations that are represented here today. But now, thanks to Oprah Winfrey and Maya Angelou and a lot of other big-name people, hardworking people, people like you also, children pretty much know nowadays that it's wrong for anyone to treat them poorly. That some people do care and are interested in their welfare. But child abuse prevention is still not in the mainstream of public discourse, nor is it a topic in the arena for everyday conversations for most people. At work, at parties, at city council meetings, PTA meetings, and the like. And I believe that it really needs to be. Maybe a short example of that is I'm speaking on Saturday at Kodak in Warner Robins, and person there I was talking to said, I have no idea what kind of turnout we're going to have. People don't really like to hear about sexual abuse. When you hear some of the statistics, you'll probably feel the way that I do, that these things need to be talked about. So let's take a moment and focus on a few of the realities of contemporary life and the impact that they have on childhood these days. When I was a child, the affliction of polio took center stage in public discourse. Now, trauma, lies, greed, and sexual seduction and infidelities do. Tiger Woods may have taken sex addiction out of the closet and made it a household term. But what about cyber sex addiction in particular? People don't seem to be talking about that, but I'm going to talk about it, because I think the parents should talk to their children about it. It's predicted to be the next tsunami of mental health. It's becoming such a big problem. 1/3 of all downloads per month and 1/4 of all searches per day are for pornography. Internet porn supplies an immediate, private, and easily accessed hit. And while it does that, when someone does that repeatedly, day after day, compulsively, it actually changes the erotic template of the brain to the point where it may take from 3.5 to 5 years of comprehensive recovery to heal the brain. The pornography industry has grown so large that it generates revenue exceeding the combined revenues of ABC, CBS, and NBC combined. And money generated by cyber sex addiction totals more than the combined revenues of football, baseball, and basketball franchises. When I learned all these things, I began to think of the internet pornography industry as a voracious monster prowling around every neighborhood, looking for entry into each family's home. And who's more vulnerable than our youth? When I was a teen, it was common for boys to look at pornographic magazines and stick them under their mattresses. But the sexual development of many adolescents today is dramatically affected by their easy access to the internet, where exposure to cyber sex grooms them to believe that being sexually active at a very young age is normal. Colleagues of mine who work exclusively with teenagers — I don't work exclusively with teenagers because I raised 4 kids and it was too scary — confirm that it's now common for oral sex to be seen as the new goodnight kiss, and for girls to send sexual photos of themselves to boys as special gifts. Research has shown that teens who use pornography engage more often in oral and anal sex, have more sexual partners, and more oral and genital STDs. The mainstreaming of pornography is turning it into a sort of spectator sport. Teens may turn to it to fulfill their sexual curiosity, but unfortunately, at their stage of brain development, they don't have the ability to grasp the notion that what they're seeing is fantasy, rarely achieved in reality. Instead, they compare what they see to themselves and become anxious because they don't perform or look like what they're seeing on the screen. They begin to believe that there's something wrong with them, or with their genitals even, which creates the shame base that's really the core for addictive process, sets them up to have more addictions. Another danger in teen use of internet pornography is revealed in a review of top-selling pornography videos. The majority had violent themes with verbal and physical aggression. However, only a small fraction of the females in them demonstrate a negative reaction, with the majority demonstrating a positive or neutral reaction to the violence. Unfortunately, this translates to teens that violence is normal in a sexual relationship. I'm just remembering that last night we stopped at Mercer University, which is where I drove for therapy for many years. And I was walking around the campus, and these three boys came along, three young men. They looked like they were probably sophomore year, junior year of college. They sort of looked like trouble. And I heard one say to the other, I really want to rape her. You know what I mean? I really want to rape her. And the other guys laughed. Yeah, I know what you mean. And I was too scared to say anything. Disconcerting for parents is the statistic that 90% of 8 to 16-year-olds have viewed porn, mostly while doing homework. In fact, the average age for a child to first be exposed to pornography on the internet is 11 years old. And the largest consumer of internet porn is in the 12 to 17-year-old age group. At the same time that the cybersex industry has been growing, we've been a nation at war with other countries and among ourselves. So let's take a look at the mental health issues our country faces because of these wars. Frequent deployments put unrelenting stress on soldiers, on their marriages and their families. Rates of PTSD and traumatic brain injuries, suicides, and sexual abuse among women and men in the military are soaring. And we still have our private wars. A girl or woman is sexually assaulted every couple of minutes or so in the United States. And 3 children die every 2 days as a result of child abuse. I lost my space. Okay. Most of them are under the age of 4. And here's a fact I bet you didn't know. 5,000 women died as a result of domestic violence within a 17-month period preceding the terrorist attacks of 9/11, in which 2,948 people perished. In fact, family violence is our greatest national public health issue. 1 in every 4 families experience child sexual abuse. 90% of sexual abuse is perpetrated on children in the family. Now I have to get a little drink of water. Obviously, there are many forces that undermine our work with children, families, and social structures surrounding them, and can leave us feeling overwhelmed. Research has confirmed that one of the causes of our rapidly increasing crime rate, particularly by children, is unattachment. Yet whether this problem is created by economic crisis, by dual career marriages, by divorce, war, trauma, or addictions, never before in the history of our country have so many parents been away from home and their children at the most critical times. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk is an internationally acclaimed expert on trauma. He gave a workshop in Atlanta to therapists not long ago and reported the results of several studies indicating that there's a direct relationship between many of the leading causes of death among adults and childhood abuse and family dysfunction. We may have known that intuitively for years, but now science, through advancements in neuroscience, is confirming it. One particularly riveting finding is that now a child who is a victim of abuse or neglect has about a 4,600% more chance of becoming a drug addict. Isn't that just phenomenal? A 4,600% more chance of becoming a drug addict. Based on the statistics that I just read you, I should either be dead or a drug addict. But I'm not. I'm a pretty high-functioning adult. I'm a wife, a mother, a grandma, professional. But don't be intimidated by that in any way, because it's been a long road. It's taken me half a century to be able to stand before you today and to tell my story to you, to tell it to the world through my book. And each step forward has been influenced by someone bold enough to live with integrity and to care about me. The specifics of my personal journey are not easy to talk about, and they're not easy to hear, particularly for folks who have some personal history of abuse themselves. Please know that my intention is not to trigger anybody, but rather to give you a sense of hope and enthusiasm. But if you need to tune out or walk out, that's fine. I'm one of the 65 million Americans that the United States Department of Health and Human Services reports are survivors of sexual abuse. RAINN, the Rape and Incest National Network, reports that 1 out of every 6 women and 1 out of every 33 men have been the victims of an attempted or completed rape in their lifetimes. I'm the 1 out of the 6 women. My little brother was 1 out of the 33 men because he was gang raped one night. My own situation was that I was raped repeatedly by my own father. And he got me pregnant twice. I was only 12 the first time, and I was 17 years old the second time. I had remembered many excruciatingly painful events of my growing up, but not these. I had repressed every memory of sexual abuse until I had been in therapy myself for 10 years. I was 40 years old and tending to my mother who was dying. And through a constellation of triggering events, memories began to emerge through flashbacks while making love with my husband, Peter, a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point, who had no idea when he married me during the Vietnam War that my body would become a field of landmines and our marriage would need open heart surgery. Just as our 4 daughters were beginning to leave home and go to college. We call those the hell years of our marriage. I grew up in a community very different from the one that we're all sitting in today. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I was the second oldest of 4 children, the oldest girl, and a parentified child. If you don't know what parentified means, it's the child that had a lot of parental kind of responsibility. An example might be I made Thanksgiving dinner for my family when I was 10 years old. Did laundry, checked on my sister and brother's homework, things like that. My father, my perpetrator, was a highly esteemed physician and a gifted pianist. But he was also an untreated manic depressive and an alcoholic. My mother, who had a college degree in French and a beautiful soprano voice, was also an alcoholic. Increasingly so, from the time I was 10 years old, and falling down drunk during many, maybe most of my high school days. Much of my childhood was a living hell. A hell I've had to revisit and work my way out of innumerable times throughout my life. But fortunately, there were many people along the way who helped me, people who cared, people whose lives modeled how to be a sober, awake, compassionate woman. People who didn't give up on me. People who did their own personal work so that they could relate with wisdom and an open heart. People who believed they could help someone, they could really make a difference despite the odds. How many of you saw the movie Precious when it came out several years ago? A fair number of you. I thought that movie was great. It brought to light so much of what goes on in the dark places of our families, the dark places of our culture and our souls. When I think of that movie, a song from church comes to my head. The words are pretty much from Scripture. You know, what you hear in the dark, you must speak in the light. You are salt for the earth. You are bread for the world. I think that movie helped and will continue to help a lot of people. I know that it helped me. My husband and I saw it shortly after it came out, and when it was over, I said out loud in the movie theater, "Thank you, every person who made this film possible. Thank you, thank you, thank you." I've been a therapist for 30 years. I'm 65 years old. I've met a lot of people and I've heard a lot of stories in my life. Precious and I have a few things in common, but I've never met another woman who was impregnated by her father. Seeing that on the screen pulled more poison out of me. It allowed more tears. It allowed more anguish to pour out of my body. Unlike Precious, I grew up in a beautiful brownstone, almost a mansion. I had pretty dresses to put on after being abused, and I was surrounded by music and the arts, which are so good for the soul and so healing, as the children celebrated today. And unlike Precious, I didn't birth my father's children. No, because mine is the rich white girl, doctor's daughter story. My father performed 2 abortions on me. One in secret in his office, and one in secret in the basement of our home. Right before my book came out, I called my sister to tell her some things that were in it that I was afraid she might not know, and I didn't want her to hear it, from the book. And she was like, "Oh, so that's what was going on." She had just gone back to the old neighborhood and run into a next-door neighbor. And the neighbor said, "Your father was so strange, and I always wondered if there was an abortion clinic going on in the basement." It just kind of gave me goosebumps. But again, like Precious, I had teachers who took an interest in me. I went to a school that felt safe. I was brought up Catholic. I went to a parochial school, and fortunately I wasn't abused by priests like so many were. School was a happy place for me, a healing place, a place where people cared about me, and where I learned about love and Christ and faith and hope. So I went to a school that felt safe, and I was determined to make something good of my life. My memoir is part of that. It's dedicated to the well-being of children, and it ends with this paragraph. I implore you to become proactive. Help me to help my memoir become a call to arms. Loving arms, the only kind of arms that should ever touch a child. Take what you've read, what you've learned, what you've been emotionally moved by, and let it motivate you to contribute to the safety of children, to the healing of sexual abuse survivors, and to restoration of virtue. In the 1950s and early 60s, people didn't talk about sex. It was something secret and sort of shameful. Rape certainly was not a word that would generally be used, nor was the word abortion, particularly in the Catholic school that I went to. Statistics on domestic violence weren't even compiled until women began to find their voices in the 1970s. In the 80s, Dr. Judith Herman, a psychiatrist at Harvard Medical School, wrote about the deeply entrenched cultural dictates to see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil, particularly regarding incest. With these strong taboos in place, who could have imagined the atrocities that I experienced at the hands of my father? Even now, in our time, though violent stories are on TV daily, people really don't want to think that these things really happen to children. It's as if they're sort of numb to it. And if they don't allow the awareness into consciousness, they can keep believing that it only happens in poor, uneducated families, not in middle class or upper class or educated families. And of course, in my situation, the status of being a physician made my father immune from all kinds of consequences. Particularly, that was a period where people sort of worshiped their doctors. He was on staff of 5 hospitals on the New York State Board of Examiners for ophthalmology, and he was ophthalmologist for the Brooklyn Dodgers. My friends thought I was so lucky to get free tickets to the games and autographed baseballs. Nobody suspected what was going on. But they could have if they sought out information. They could have if they had learned to see the signs. People need to be educated about what the signs are. The people in my life could have stopped him because the signs were he was brilliant, but strange. He had no real personal friends. He was overly interested in me and constantly interested in my body. In fact, if my 5th grade teacher had been educated about signs to look for, there may have been intervention after the first time I was raped. It would have been so obvious to her that I was in trouble. To show you what I mean, I'm going to read an excerpt from my memoir. I'll tell you first that school was a safe place for me. And I was 10 in this situation. My older brother was 13, my sister was 7, and my younger brother was 4. My teacher's name was Sister Anise. This is the morning after the first rape. And I think in this, I'm basically having a sort of psychotic episode. I wake up in my own bed the next morning, but I don't know how I got there. The last thing I remember is tucking Lucy and Paul into their beds. It's my little brother and sister. Andrew is my older brother. I smell bacon and toast, and I hear Daddy and Andrew and Lucy and Paul in the kitchen, but I don't want to be in their family anymore. I want to be Shirley Temple. I hum on the Good Ship Lollipop while I get dressed in my uniform, a royal blue jumper and white short-sleeve blouse with Peter Pan collar. And then I spend a long time in Mommy's bathroom, looking in the mirror, practicing Shirley Temple smiles, pulling the rubber bands out of my hair, brushing out the braids, wedding sections, twisting them and holding them in place with Mommy's bobby pins. My mother was in the hospital at this time. I'm not sure I said that. I have long, thick, straight brown hair. Mommy braided it every morning until she got sick. She would pull it real tight and neat looking. I loved the way she did it. Daddy's been fixing it while she's in the hospital, but I hate the way he does it. You don't need your daddy to braid your hair today, I say to the little girl in the mirror. Today you're wearing ringlets. When it's time to leave for school, I remove the bobby pins, but I'm afraid that because my hair is still wet, brushing it might take the curl out, so I don't brush it. I skip through the vestibule, convinced that I would win a Shirley Temple look-alike contest. Outside, my hair bounces when I walk. I love that. It's still damp, so my head is chilly, but I figure it'll have plenty of time to dry during my walk to school. My class has to line up outside the rectory until the morning bell rings. I take my place in line, expecting compliments from my friends and teacher. But I hear the giant-sized rosary beads hanging from Sister Anissa's belt clang as she waves her hands in the air, pushing the other children aside so she can get to me. Miss Graham, who in God's holy name do you think you are, coming to school looking like that? Your mother would never let you out of the house looking so ridiculous. Why, if she knew, it would break her heart. You look like an imbecile. Everyone in the class is staring at me. Who in God's holy name do I think I am? Shirley Temple. I always wanted to be her, and I was almost positive I was, but I'm wrong. I'm not Shirley Temple. I'm not even Catherine Graham. I'm Miss Graham, imbecile. My heart is beating very fast, like a little animal living inside my stupid, disgusting Miss Graham chest, in my ugly Miss Graham body. Sister Anise is right. Mommy would never let me come to school looking so ridiculous. If she knew, thank God in His holy name, she doesn't. It really might break her heart. Poor Mommy. I want to hide. But I'm right out in public on the corner of 6th Street and 8th Avenue, and I have to stay in school. It's the law. I think hopefully a teacher at today's time would see that as a child who needed some intervention. Fortunately, I'm no longer 10. I'm 65, and my story turned out well, far better than I ever imagined during many stages of my recovery. The story of my abuse and the powerful healing I experienced as a patient in a 16-year therapy is described in my memoir. Writing and publishing it became for me a moral imperative, because ultimately the story of healing from incest became a story about how the power of love dispels the power of evil. A story about the power of psychotherapy to heal. A story about faith, about marriage, about sacrifice, courage, redemption, and other life lessons. A story that I believed somewhere, somehow, sometime, someone was going to need to hear. It might bring nourishment to a heart starving for sustenance. It might bring light into someone's darkness, just as the stories of other child abuse and incest and rape survivors were for me. when I read their books in desperation, searching for hope, a clue, a direction, a path toward healing. And I was right, it has, and it does. I've received emails, voicemails, Facebook messages. I'm just going to read you a couple that are particularly touching. The first time that I was going to a reading when my book first came out, I checked my office voicemail that morning, and I had this message left from a woman in Texas who was having a tough time. She said, "I just needed to hear your voice. I needed to know you were really real, and I can hear in your voice that you're okay. Thank you." Another, "Your book gave me permission to speak about it. Now I'm ready for therapy." Another, crying, "I couldn't imagine that a nun could help you recover from an abortion until I read how one helped you with yours." Another, "My parents have been pathetic alcoholics for years. Now I'm faced with their elder care. I appreciated reading in your memoir about how you managed that. It gave me some ideas." Another, "I never could really understand how these things could happen. Now I do. My best friend is an incest survivor. Now I understand more about how to support her." And another, "I've always felt that my wife's father raped her, but I was afraid to ask her until I read your book." And another, "Your book gave me hope. I never talked to anyone about my abuse until I told you." She had sent me an email. And finally, "I have young children, and after your book, I'm committed to teach them to pray." In closing, I'd like to share a quote with you and then I'll tell you a sweet story and just a few closing remarks. The quote is from a rabbi named Michael Lerner in his book, A Politics of Meaning. He says, "We need to be engaged, both individually and collectively, in the process of healing and transforming the world. And we need to reject all those feelings and ideas that tell us that such change is impossible." Okay. My granddaughters love to have me tell them stories about their mothers when they were little girls. And one of my granddaughters, in particular, just worships the ground that I walk on, which is a lot of fun for me. It will be until I fall off the pedestal. But so they're always giggling when they ask about their mothers and on and on. One night, my granddaughter was 8 at this time. As I kissed her goodnight, she squeezed me tight and she said, "Grandma, you are the mother of my mother, and I have a very good mother who takes good care of me and my sister. She is a good mother because you were a good mother to her. And when I grow up, I'm going to be a good mother too. See? And it all started with you." She was too young, of course, to know anything about how the power of psychotherapy is part of this mix. But I know, and I guess the thoughts I want to leave you with are that you and I have unique gifts to bring to the table. For me, it's writing and being a therapist. We have unique gifts to bring with leaders and followers, colleagues and friends, neighbors and acquaintances, in every social stratum and in many contexts. Your gifts might be teaching or counseling, financial support, legal help, child care, foster care, or something else. Whatever your gifts are, I hope that this luncheon will motivate you to contribute your gifts to the cause. As the children sang, the future's calling us. And I say, the children need you. And the adults they will become need you. And the children of the adults they become will need you too. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Dale Knifong, your State Farm agent on Hillcrest. All of us here can provide you with whatever you need from an insurance standpoint: auto, health, life, homeowners insurance, and even financial services. Check us out at our new location on Hillcrest Parkway between Dublin High School and Kroger.
Exchange Club of Dublin sponsors the ACE Award. ACE, which stands for Accepting the Challenge of Excellence, recognizes students who have made dramatic changes in their attitude and performance sometime in their high school years and have overcome significant circumstances to beat the odds and are now eligible for graduation. This type of student may have never received any type of positive recognition for their success in overcoming the odds of their circumstances. Recognition of a well-deserving youth could have an impact on his or her future. In years past, each local high school could submit one nominee, and one winner was chosen from among this group. This year, the ACE Award Committee has decided to award each nominee as their high school's ACE winner. Each nominee certainly is deserving of this recognition. The ACE Award Committee members are John Mark Butler, Jeff Bruton, Wayne Kane, Lucas Cowart, and myself. The committee conducted an interview process to make a final selection from the nominees. The top nominee will represent the Dublin Exchange Club at the Georgia district level. The 2014 ACE Award winners are, and if you would, please stand where you're at. Third place, Jarvis Burnett, West Lawrence High School. Jarvis will receive a $250 scholarship award. Second place is Jonathan McCain, East Lawrence High School. And Jonathan will receive a $500 scholarship award. You can be seated. Representing the Dublin Exchange Club at the Georgia District level is first place winner Ashley Valenzuela. Ashley is a senior, graduating senior at Dublin High School, and will receive a $1,000 scholarship award. You can be seated, Ashley. We will not be able to read each of the narratives submitted by the nominees and their school representatives. However, with the permission from our first place nominee, Ashley, Ashley will allow us to share her life story, one that will explain the true meaning of the accepting the challenge of excellence. Wayne Kane will do the honors of reading Ashley's narrative.
First off, this has been an extremely long meeting today, and I want to appreciate everybody that's here and everybody that stayed for these presentations. Child abuse in America is a serious problem, and I'm proud to be a member of the Dublin Exchange Club, which one of our major projects is the prevention of child abuse. Kelly acts like this microphone don't work. I'm hoping that it does. It seems to work for everybody but Kelly. The legendary Superman actor Christopher Reeve once said, "I think a hero is an ordinary individual who finds strength to persevere and endure in spite of overwhelming obstacles." The ACE Award exemplifies that same spirit by recognizing these ACE winners today. They have each shown a spirit of heroism which may have gone unnoticed by many of their peers. Each have endured an often silent battle and have not intentionally brought attention to themselves or to their struggles. It is humbling to be among these young heroes today. This is the story of a young heroine, Ashley Valenzuela, a senior at Dublin High School. Her guidance counselor, Jan Carr, states, "After getting to know Ashley, I have come to realize that these last 2 years have been the tip of the iceberg. She lives every day in a survival mode. We never fully realized what Ashley had to deal with. As if every attempt she has made to find some sense of family and stability was met with abandonment and more obstacles." Ashley writes, "No one ever said to me that life would be easy, but no one ever told me how hard it would be either. At the age of 18, I felt I have the weight of the world on my shoulders. My life is so much like math. It's filled with problems that no one knows nor understands the answers." Ashley's story begins with her years of deception by her mother, of where, y'all have to excuse me, it's kind of tough for me to read this, get choked up if I don't undo that tie. Ashley's story begins with years of deception by her mother, of where or whom her father was. Her mother would try to avoid the discussion by stating, "He's not worth knowing." Eventually, her mother sat her down and told her that she was the product of a kidnapping and a rape that resulted in the pregnancy. Since that day, Ashley felt like she was a mistake. She talks of being rejected by her younger siblings because of having an unknown father and was told that she was not one of them. Around the age of 5, Ashley began to be molested by her mother's brother when the family would take trips to visit with him. Being so young, she didn't know what to do. At first, she thought it was his way of showing her that he loved her. It is logical to understand that at her age. She should be able to trust the adults that are in her life. This trust turned into disgust when she became old enough to understand what abuse really was. This occurred over a 3-year period and stopped only when Ashley began to refuse to go on the family trips to visit her uncle. Ashamed of what happened, Ashley kept the abuse a secret until she was 16 years old when she revealed it to her mother. Unfortunately, there was never a legal resolution to the abuse, and her uncle was never confronted on the problem. Ashley was well on her way to become what is known as a parentified child. This is a child who's forced to grow up and be more responsible than the adults around her. Over the next several years, Ashley changed residence over 12 times and went to 4 different schools. She moved between Wrightsville, East Dublin, Swainsboro, and finally to Dublin. Ashley never lost sight of her goal of one day graduating from high school. On February 21st, 2012, an emotional tragedy struck again in Ashley's life. In the middle of her 10th grade year, her older brother, Jonathan, was walking on Atlanta roadside and was struck and killed by a drunk driver. Jonathan was Ashley's motivation throughout her young life, someone that she looked up to as her father figure. Ashley says, "He was all I had. He was my backbone. When he died, I felt like my whole world had ended." Over 2 years later, she still has struggles with the grief of this loss. The grief was more than her mother could bear, and the subsequent emotional and family dysfunction resulted in Ashley being put out of her own house. In August of 2012, she moved from Swainsboro to Dublin to live with an aunt in the housing projects and to start her junior year in high school at Dublin. Ashley says, "At first I loved it. I thought this would be the fresh start, and I need to try to get my life back on track." A brief ray of hope shined after her move to Dublin. Ashley eventually learned from her aunt that her biological father lived in Dublin. She was able to make contact with him and meet him for lunch. She described the first meeting that she saw him. Her feeling became complete, finally knowing who she was and where she came from. She also learned that she was not a product of rape, that this was a lie previously told her by her mother. In fact, her mother had moved away and never told her father where she moved to. Her father told her, she left this reunion feeling hopeful that she would finally learn more about her father and be able to become a part of each other's lives again. But again, within 2 weeks, hope faded to the disappointment as she learned that her father had moved to South Carolina and left no faltering address. Although the initial feelings of abandonment and rejection were overwhelming, she called on the strength from all of this, and she did not let this all too familiar scenario set her back. It wasn't long before her aunt grew resentful of Ashley living in her home. Ashley says that she made her feel like she was a burden to her aunt's financial situation, to the point where Ashley would skip eating and would never take food out of the house. Soon the emotional and mental abuse led to physical abuse, and she would have to stay isolated in her room to avoid any confrontation. A student senior in high school should be a time to enjoy the accomplishments of an academic career and share special time with special friends. This is not always the case with Ashley. A gesture of admiration was given to Ashley by her classmates when she was selected to represent the senior class on the homecoming court. Those that knew her situation also knew this would be an exceptional financial demand on her. Her excitement was shared with her mother, who promised to help with the cost of getting her dressed and the accessories for this event. A few days prior to homecoming, Ashley's mother informed her that there would be no help coming. Ashley was left in this awkward situation. Although she never asked for help, the school staff pitched in to fill in the gaps, and Ashley was able to enjoy the event. This past January, the violence from the aunt reached the point that Ashley had to do something. During the night, she fled through her bedroom window to an awaiting car of a co-worker. She was not able to take any clothes or any of her school books or materials. Attempts to collect her personal belongings were met with threats of violence and angry refusal. It was several days later, under escort of the police, that she was able to return to the aunt's home to retrieve the items. She was able to move in with her co-worker, which allowed her to have a ride to the job she had got at Checkers. She takes pride in being independent and able to pay her own bills. She often works a late shift, which is her only option during her school work. She leaves work sometimes as late as 2 o'clock in the morning after having to clean up the restaurant. She has no car, so she has to rely on transportation as it is available. She often appears very tired at school due to her late work schedule, but continues to maintain a high beat average. Instead of the usual beach trip, her week of spring break was an opportunity for her to work more hours and earn more money. However, tragedy struck again in her estranged family. Her second oldest brother, who lived in Swainsboro, was struck and killed by a vehicle. She had to miss work to attend this funeral. She did not spend much time with the family after the funeral, as she did not feel welcome and there was too much tension. The following week was Ashley's senior prom. She had not planned on attending due to the cost. A false promise from her mother again gave her hope that she could go, but once again her mother bailed out on helping her. Before school staff could offer assistance, Ashley's industrious and self-reliant nature already moved in to take out a loan and to pay for and to pay the loan off with her next paycheck. Needless to say, Ashley looked stunning when she arrived at the prom. Ashley has been involved in the Air Force Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps of Dublin High School with a plan to enter the Air Force upon graduation. During recent recruiting interviews, she learned she would not be eligible to enter the Air Force for at least another year. Ashley knew that she wanted to get her career started in the military service and could not wait the additional year. So she shifted her plans and will enter the Army boot camp in July of this year. Ashley wants to eventually get a college degree as a mental health therapist. She says, "I want to be able to tell people my story in hopes that it will motivate them not to give up on life. I want it to encourage all teens not to be ashamed of who they are and what they're going through. I want to be able to assure people that everyone goes through things for a reason. God has a master plan for all of us. We just have to be patient and accept what we go through. Sometimes we go through more than others because He, God, wants to be sure that we are able to handle the greatness of our future. Let it motivate you to want to be more in life, to achieve more as a human being in this world." Ashley's vision is also one day to start her own organization where she can help feed, shelter, and clothe the homeless. We can be blessed that she wants to start this shelter in her hometown, Dublin. Her goal is for this to become a worldwide missionary organization. Ashley says she wants to impact lives of so many that it will cause them to want to give to the community as well as the world. Romans 5:2-5 says, "And we rejoice in the hope of the glory of God. Not only so, but we also rejoice in our sufferings, because we know that sufferings produces perseverance. Perseverance, character. Character, hope. And hope does not disappoint us, because God has poured out His love into our hearts by the Holy Spirit, whom He has given us." Ashley, Jonathan, and Jarvis, your life story exemplify the excellence of this scripture, a story of undeserved suffering and unrelenting perseverance, of exemplary character and a resolute hope. And this hope based not in a wishful thought, but in a promise poured out into your hearts by God, will never disappoint you. If the audience would please stand to show support. The Stepping Stone and the guests of this event want you to know that we stand with you in support of your dreams and your aspirations. It is with the highest honor the Dublin Exchange Club presents each of you with these awards for accepting the challenge of excellence. Kelly?
Last thing, y'all. I know that this has been a very long luncheon, a very good luncheon. I'm here on behalf of the DA's office, and specifically Craig Frazier. He was pulled away on another business at the last minute. I'm Brandon Faircloth, one of the attorneys at the office. Thank y'all all for being here, and thank you especially to Stepping Stone. They're a wonderful resource here, not only for prosecuting cases, but also for helping these children through some of the most difficult things they'll ever go through. And as we see all the time, sometimes they don't have anybody else to turn to. They don't have somebody else they can trust, and they provide that for them that can lessen some of the bad impact that this has and can set them on the right path going on. To that end, we also have a check for $1,500 from the DA's office going towards Stepping Stone and all the future endeavors. Thank y'all very much, and thank y'all for being here.